Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes on the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Cassandra with Achievable, and if you're studying for the GRE, Achievable gives you a complete modern prep experience, clear explanations, targeted practice questions that adapt to you, built-in study planning, essay feedback, and full-length practice exams, all in one affordable course. You can try Achievable free at achievable.me and use the code podcast for 10% off if you continue. And so let's get started. Today we have Emmanuela Stanislaus with us, and I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, Cassandra. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk all things grad school. Just a quick introduction. I'm Dr. Emmanuela. I'm a career strategist and founder of Dr. Emmanuela Consulting. My work really focuses on overwhelmed first generation women of color graduate students, where I really assist them, as well as early career professionals, in turning their degrees into meaningful and well-aligned careers. I spent about 17 years in higher education administration, working primarily in the career services space, where I worked with recruiters from Fortune 100 companies, helping them to brand and to really recruit college students. And so that's where some of my background lies. And I've spent the past almost 6 years working closely with graduate students who are incredibly capable, but often are unsure how to articulate their value and really navigate the hidden rules of the job market. So, again, super excited to be here and share some of my insights and strategies with your listeners.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. So, yeah, today we're talking about what you mentioned strategies with grad school and with career in general, and specifically in today's job market, which is a bit precarious at the moment. So, to start things off, starting from the beginning, what would you recommend for students to like how to approach grad school, whether it's deciding to take that step and go, or maybe there's another path that might work better for them? What's the best way for them to make that decision?
I think that's a great word, precarious. We haven't been here before, right? There's so much uncertainty. We have rising inflation, we have the rising cost of higher education in general, and then we have this tightening up of the job market where we're seeing mass layoffs. We're also seeing fewer jobs, like job hiring is slowing down. And so, what do you do? And I think the biggest thing I would say is you approach this with strategy. In the past, before this precarious time frame, folks would probably utilize grad school almost like a waiting around. Maybe the job market has cooled down. I will wait out the job market and spend a couple of years in grad school while things kind of recalibrate. And then maybe when I graduate, it'll be a better situation. But the thing about it right now is grad school is very expensive. It's very time intensive, it's stressful, and you don't know what's going to happen, right? And so you need to be strategic. I often tell folks to start with why. If you're thinking about grad school, ask yourself why. Why do you want to go there? And don't just stop at that. Simek, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He has a lot of books out talking about the start with why, and that's where some of my thoughts around this comes from. But what happens is you ask yourself why, and then you keep asking yourself why until you get a deeper answer. And really, if you're doing your research and finding out why you want to go there, and then talking to folks who are in grad school and asking them, or who have their grad degree, asking them if grad school was necessary for their success, was it helpful, and asking current folks about what it's like in grad school. All of that is going to help you to have a more informed way of looking at grad school and seeing if that would be a viable option for you. I think another piece of advice too is looking at the job outlook of it. There are resources out there that can help you to see what are the prospects in the future in 5, 10 years. What jobs are in the future that don't exist now that maybe a grad program or degree could help you with, or maybe looking at assessing what you have now. What degrees do you have now, and how that could potentially help with what's coming down the pipeline? Grad school is not always the option. It is an option, but making an informed decision is going to really help you out.
Yeah, I love what you said too about asking those who have done it, like getting people who have gone through that process, gone through that journey, and really understanding their perspective on it, because that can be helpful in kind of gathering that data and really making your decision. So, reaching out to those who have done it is going to be a huge advantage for you to help you make that decision. You touched on it with having some foresight for the future, right? Like you need to know and be prepared for what's to come. However, that's a little unknown. So now we're going to get into it inevitably about AI, right? So how is AI reshaping the job market, and how can you plan for that when it's still this very new thing that is it's rapidly increasing in the workplace? And with that, how can people choose different programs that they want to go into?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, AI is disrupting a lot of things, right? And I think that is the cause of what we're seeing in the job market with these mass layoffs. And a lot of organizations are preparing for the great AI takeover. However, that still remains to be seen. I really don't want to add to maybe the uneasiness that folks are feeling around AI taking jobs and that sort of thing. I don't think that we're there yet, and we're going to have some time before we get to whatever it is that folks are predicting. But AI is really it's in our face, it's very present. And I think what we need to do, and I'm talking about folks who are in like actually working or are thinking about grad school, but then also institutions and faculty. I think we need to embrace AI and embrace it more instead of being fearful of it or rejecting it or banning it and its usage in the university setting. I think faculty need to really learn how to use AI ethically and effectively and find ways to integrate it into their programs to help students solve real world problems, which is the valuable piece that employers are looking for. So that's how I think AI is disrupting the job market and how folks need to really think about it. So that's the one piece. Institutions need to embrace it, and faculty need to learn how to use it, and then making sure that is included in the programs and helping students to have real applied learning for AI and how it can help them be more efficient, how it can help them to solve real problems and that sort of thing. If the programs aren't doing that, you yourself as a graduate student need to find ways of learning how to use AI. You can use AI as a tutor. You can use AI to help you with your time management, with your study skills. You can help AI with data analysis, right? I think the biggest thing is you'll need to be critical with how you're using it because AI can make up things, it can fabricate things. And so that's where you, as the utilizer of AI, can show your abilities and strengths by using the critical eye, by using your common sense, analytical skills to ensure that the end product that you provide to folks or that you yourself use really has a human lens to how it looks like the final result, but then also ensuring that everything in there is correct. But I think we need to embrace it rather than competing against it, and just see how it can help you in the roles that are coming up. Because the usage of AI, like, employers want to know that you are using AI and you're using it to do your work effectively. And so finding ways to do that now is only going to benefit you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly like you said, you need to find ways to incorporate it and embrace it. And like it's not going anywhere. So you either have to get on that train or get left behind, honestly. So with that, then, obviously knowing how to use AI, use it effectively, and understanding that it still requires critical thinking. AI often provides misinformation, so you really need to know how to spot that. But what other skills and even experience is going to be beneficial for students now?
Yeah, great question. And you know what? Before I jump into this, like, I understand that there's like ethical implications of using AI as well, right? And so I just want to put that out there. And it is important for us to have a balance because, like you said, some of us may be left behind if we don't know how to utilize it, and using it in moderation, not using it for things that you know how to use. You need to also not be too dependent on that. And I do want to put that out there just so folks understand that I'm conflicted myself with using it and the resources that it demands and the centers and the effects that it has with some of our most vulnerable populations. And so we're in a country. So, like, I do want to share that. But to answer your question about skills, I think one of the biggest things is you become valuable when you are able to translate the knowledge that you have into impact, right? So, for example, we're talking about grad school and that sort of thing. You can have the degree, but you really need to know how to, like, how do the skills that you gain in that program, how does that apply to an organization? What how does that help you solve some of their pressing problems? How does that help you tell your story, your personal brand, and the impact that you want to have in the world? That's super valuable. That's going to be a skill that folks really want and value. I think employers are also prioritizing applied skills. So things like data literacy, right? How do you analyze data? How do you use data to make informed decisions? Project management is always at the top of the list in terms of skills that folks want you to utilize. And that's in any role. You don't have to be a project manager, like that be in your title in order for you to do project management type things. Because if you're in a role where you have to manage a program, you have to use project management skills to make sure that things are flowing the way that they are, that you're tracking to budget, you're tracking to goals, and all of those kinds of things. Communication is also not going anywhere, right? Whether you're communicating one on one with folks or in a group, but then knowing how to also communicate to AI so that you can get what you want, right? Because AI, if you're putting in garbage, it's going to spit out garbage, right? So how do you communicate so that you can get the results that you want in problem solving, for sure. I think another thing is experience. Experience is super important. So not only relying on the degree that you have, but while you're in grad school, thinking about experiences, creating experiences that's going to get you to the target that you have, right? Because before we talked about, if you're thinking about grad school, figuring out what your why is, right? And that why is going to keep you going during the hard times, but then keep you focused on your goals, right? And so you're creating these experiences. Maybe you're creating your own internships or practicums if that's not a part of your program. And doing that so that it can pay off in the future, right? You never want to be over credentialed with no experience. And so these experiences are going to help you to really craft a career that is intentional and leads to the end result that you want.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it comes down to that planning aspect. Like you really have to think into the future, making these decisions, understanding what you need to get under your belt in order to, like you said, reach your target goal. So then I guess with that, getting more into the career and the industries, are there specific industries or roles even that are gonna withstand any economic uncertainty? We hear about all these layoffs, and I think a big one, obviously, with AI is in the tech industry with coding and things like that. You know, people are losing their jobs because they're not needed anymore. They have AI to do that. In your opinion, what industries do you think can withstand this time?
That's a great question. Yeah, this time, you're so right. Like and I used to work with computer science students, and this kind of hits home. That was one of the areas that folks really thought was like sustainable, especially if you're looking for roles where you can make six figures and climb up socially. And it's really sad to see what's going on in that space, but I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't really answer this. I really think that we don't know, just like we said with the computer science piece. In the last recession, it was across the board, different types of industries. I think what we need to think about, especially now, because healthcare and government was also one of those areas that we thought were pretty stable, but we've seen layoffs in those spaces. What I'd say to encourage students is to think in terms of functions versus industries, because your skills are transferable and you can move across sectors that are impacted, especially when hiring is slow or if AI is something that is impacting hiring in a certain industry. I think it's important to think about your skills, think about how they can be transferable to other areas to help you be nimble and be able to jump to different sectors whenever it makes sense, and whenever you're seeing like the tea leaves are showing that there's a turn here. Assessing your skills, working with a career coach that can probably help you, because a lot of times you're a little too close to it when you're working, or maybe you feel a little distressed or you're not really sure. A career coach can help you to identify what those skills are, how you can actually market it in a current market, especially if you're someone who hasn't moved around a lot. Maybe you've been at one company for a long time, or you've been at a particular industry for a long time. It may make sense to try and understand how are other industries talking about a particular skill that you have, and not doing it alone. I think that's going to be the biggest thing that I would really suggest to folks.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and also a great segue into what I wanted to ask next, which is um, with today's job market, I really think it comes down to who you know. These industries are very competitive, and if you don't have someone that can help you in that regard, it's going to be even more difficult. So, how can you start building your network and how can you manage and work within that network so that a thing that I always think of is you should be giving as much as you're receiving, right? You don't just want to be asking and then give nothing back in return, right? Pay it forward, so to speak. So, how can you start building that network early on? And then, how can you use it to your advantage once you're looking for jobs and once you're getting into your career?
Yeah, and I love talking about networking. And I want to set the stage by letting folks know that I am an introvert. Okay. I know you're listening to this, or probably think when you listen to podcasts, oh, everyone's extroverted. I am introvert. I'm an introvert. Okay. So I love being alone. I don't know, I could stare at a wall for a long time. And so I say that so that folks who may identify as an introvert can know where I'm coming from. I am you and I get it. And hopefully, I'll share some tips that I use as well to manage my energy because that's an important part of navigating networking as an introvert. To start off with your first part, like networking is so important. And even before we got to this precarious time, networking was very important. And, I don't know. I always repeat this stat and I really don't know where it comes from or even if it's true, but there is a stat that goes that 70% of jobs are not posted. I don't know how true that is, but I've been repeating it for a really long time and I heard it somewhere. And I think there's truth to it, even though I don't have anything to cite for that. And why is that important? It's important because there's a hidden job market out there and that you can only tap into if you are connected to others. There's a theme here that what I've been talking about. I think we talked about this in the first question that you asked about talking to others and finding out how was grad school for them? How did it help them with their journey? That is networking. That is tapping into your community. And we need to, in order to be successful, we need to find ways to navigate networking in a way that works for us. Networking is really just talking to people, finding common ground, asking questions that are valuable to you. But as Cassandra said, and I always say this too, give more than you receive. No one wants to feel like they're being drained for their resources and the other person isn't providing any help. You need to approach networking in terms of how can I help someone else? So when you're meeting someone, you're talking to them, you want to get to know them and find out more about them because you want to help them, right? Because you also want someone to help you, right? So if you approach networking in that way, in terms of how can I help someone, and that can be connection based, like maybe you're a connector and you hear that someone is an entrepreneur and they do X, Y, and Z, you might say, oh, I have a friend named Fred who could definitely take advantage of this. I'll introduce you. How amazing is that? You know what I mean? And when you put this out into the universe, will give it back to you. I know that sounds a little woo, but I do believe that. And while you're talking to folks, say what you want. And that's part of that universe as well. When you say that you want things, the universe will bring it to you. For example, I remember there was a point in time in my background where I wanted to be an event planner. I want to plan events. And everyone I spoke to, I said, I want to plan events. And guess what? Like within months, people were connecting me with other folks like, oh, you might want to talk to this person. They plan events at the university level. And so I had an informational interview with her, which I would definitely advise folks to do, where you are meeting with someone, usually one on one. It can be virtual, it could be over coffee, 15 to 20 minutes tops. And your thing is to learn more about them or learn more about their role. Maybe it's a role that you are thinking of pursuing, or maybe they're in an organization that you're interested in. And so those might be the three things that you want to do. And you come prepared with questions and you get information from that. So I did that with that person. And through a whole bunch of different things in the universe, I ended up getting her role. Like she left the position And I saw a position that was open within their office, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'll get to work with her. But I never reached out to her because I didn't want any to disrupt any of the recruiting. And once I got the position, I'm looking for her, and they're like, oh no, she left. They mentioned that she said that she knew someone that would be perfect for the role. And I ended up getting her job. And I have so many other stories like this. And some of my clients also have similar stories like this where these informational interviews end up helping you out. And so, again, treat it in terms of getting to know someone, learning, and then at the end of your conversation, you can always find out, like, how can I help you? You've been so helpful to me. Is there anything that I can do to help? And leaving with that so that you can definitely be helpful to someone and not just be on the receiving side. And I feel like there was another piece to your question, Cassandra, in terms of like how to keep in touch with folks. I think that it's great to connect with folks on LinkedIn after you meet them, or maybe that's where you initially start connecting with folks. And there's features on there that really help you. So you get notifications about birthdays. So that's a great way to connect with folks, wishing them a happy birthday. And it's not that you're like looking for anything. So that ties into that. Another way is congratulating them on something. Maybe it's a professor and they just recently was awarded funding or they recently published something, congratulating them on that. Another way that you can keep in touch is giving them an update on you. This is what's going on with me. And you don't have to do this like every month or whatever. Maybe it's once a quarter or once every 6 months that they're hearing from you where you're not asking for something. And so those are just a few ways that folks can keep in touch with folks.
I love that. I think that's great advice. And I really like the idea of approaching it from just a human side of it. Like this, a lot of times people see networking as a transactional relationship, and you really should try and make it more personal. And you should try and find people that not only are going to be able to help you and you help them, but that you really can truly connect with because that is, it just makes it more enriching and it also makes you more likely to help each other out. If you're really good friends with someone, you're more likely to promote them or let someone else know about them and their experience than you are someone who maybe you don't talk to as often. So I think that's really great advice. And it just makes it less daunting too, because these are all just personal relationships. And like you said, as an introvert, it can be a little overwhelming at first to be like, oh my gosh, how do I ask this person for help and what can I do? So just approach it like you're meeting a friend and find that common ground. And I think the rest will unfold naturally if it's a good fit. So, yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I just want to say everything that you said makes a lot of sense. I think one thing I want to highlight too is like a lot of folks focus on networking in terms of aspirational. And I think it's important to network across with your peers because you just never know what can happen, right? So, networking with students that are at a similar level as you, as well as networking up, is really great strategy. I think the other things too that I wanted to share was about tips for introverts with networking. And I know I spoke a lot with the last answer, and it's because I'm really passionate about networking. Introvert and networking tips. Okay. In terms of in-person events, this is where some of my tips lies. So if you're attending a networking event, I would say even ahead of time, if you're able to assess, is this networking event going to help me with a particular goal, right? Have a goal going into the event. Again, it's like why? Why am I attending? Why am I exerting my energy to go to this event? If you have decided that yes, it's great, it potentially has folks that I really want to connect with to learn more about X or learn more about Y, then yay. Second thing, it would be great if you are able to get an idea of who's going to be there. Maybe if they can provide a registration list. Sometimes they can't, but you can definitely ask and advocate for yourself in that way. The reason why I suggest this is you can then create a target list of who you want to connect with at this event. The idea of going to a networking event is not to talk to everyone. And I think that's what makes networking so overwhelming to folks. You need to have a particular goal, and a good goal can be meeting 3 people. Like, that is okay. And so, if you have that goal, then you can go with it where you can manage your energy in a good way. So, prior to the event, just making sure that you have your whatever outfit that's going to make you feel super confident, that's going to be super helpful. But then I like to listen to hype music before I go to an event. So I have special music that makes me feel super excited, super pumped, that sort of thing. And so you should find music that's going to help you as well. And so it just helps me to get that confidence. It helps me to get my energy going. Sometimes I might take an outdoor walk and just get that anxious energy out and then before I attend the event. So while I'm attending the event, again, I have these goals. I have the 3 people that I'm going to meet, and I go and I take care of those things, and I structure it in a way where I have breaks. So you should also think about breaks as well. So if you talk to a couple of people, take a break. Go outside, get some fresh air, go to the restroom if that's the only place you can go to get a little break and regroup. Take notes on what you talked about so that when you follow up with the person, you can have real life examples of what you talked about and reference that so that they can remember you. And then you go back in and you do it again, right? And then once you're done with the goals, then you can just relax. You can relax and just, if you meet other folks, that's a cherry on top, but you don't feel that added pressure of having to connect with additional folks. And if you're like me, sometimes I might do the Homer Simpson, like going into the bushes. Okay, it's time to go. And that's okay. Leave when you feel inclined to leave and celebrate the fact that you survived, right? Like by having 3 hours where you're not talking to anyone or don't talk to anyone for the rest of the day. And then follow up with those folks the next day and having some built in time where you know that you can reach out to them, thank them for the great conversation you had, and hopefully maybe scheduling some time for you to meet with them one on one to maybe have that informational interview that we talked about before, or whatever the case might be, and keeping up with them with some of those tips that we talked about, liking their post on LinkedIn or commenting or telling them happy birthday, asking how you can help them, sharing updates, all of those good things. I will definitely end it there. There are definitely more tips that I could share, but those are things that I think will definitely help you in terms of managing your energy and having success when you're attending in-person events.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice and a great way to wrap things up on a positive note. You got this. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Of course. I also even forgot to say that folks can connect with me on LinkedIn. Since, we're talking about networking, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll provide you with the link where hopefully you can put it in the show notes, and folks can visit my website at dremanuelaconsulting.com and subscribe to my email list where they can learn about my updated offerings that can support them in their job search. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Cassandra from Achievable with Emmanuela Stanislaus. And Achievable has a great online GRE course. You can try it for free at achievable.me.